There's a new painting behind me, so that means a new episode of Becoming a Master. The previous landscape I divided in 3 videos, but this one I will do in 1 video, so it will be a little bit longer than the previous ones. Now you may notice that this landscape looks quite different from the previous one, and I want to share in this video why this is. But I also want to share some other things, some challenges that I'm facing while going through the academy, and especially in my journey to become a master painter. So in this episode, I will be sharing some of those challenges I'm facing and what I think is for me the most effective and the best way to move forward in my journey. If you've seen the previous landscape I did, you notice right away I've changed something. I've decided to paint on a white. It's not a canvas, it's still a panel. This is not a panel I prepared myself, but a panel with some gesso on it, which I bought. And eventually it worked pretty well. I changed that. I've decided I'm going to leave my whole panel white instead of putting a color and see what happens with my colors. If I can get a little bit more clear, not these dark colors, but more pleasing colors. The second thing I'm doing here, I'm only working with filbert brushes, and Andrew is actually doing that in this second lesson. He's only using a filbert brush and he's using a lot of colors and just working with that filbert brush. And that was quite a nice challenge because normally I pick, as you've seen in the previous video, I pick different brushes to get different effects. But working with a filbert only was very, very interesting. It gives you a whole different way of painting and compensating for certain things. And actually I was surprised that only with these filbert brushes I could do a whole landscape. And another thing I changed is that I'm now using water. I'm using my acrylics more like, no, not watercolor, they're matte acrylics. I'm using them more like gouache. And I've decided instead of messing with mediums and all kinds of things, I just want to add water and build up my layers slowly. So I'm going to use a lot more layers. Andrew is using 3 stages, so the block in, then the detail, and then his final details. But I have to do a bit more layer painting, a lot more layers over it, letting it dry, and then paint it. Because I decided I want to have them not so thick from the beginning, which makes this paint, my paintings look so bulky and illustrative. I decided if I add some water, make them flow a little bit better. Perhaps I then can more easy compensate for the darker colors that I have. And I must say, even here when I'm working on these bushes, I already see a huge difference from the previous one. The white canvas is really helping me to adjust my colors better. And even with the trees and the bushes, the colors are way better already than in the previous painting. They're not so in your face, they're not so dark, they're a bit, well, they're dark where they need to be dark, and they are light where they need to be light. And I find this easier to compensate using some water. And that probably comes because I have a background in watercolor, but even with these acrylic paints, that worked pretty well. Although bringing in a really wet brush after the painting has dried and scrubbing, that just rubbed off all my paint. So I should not do that, but I compensated for that by not pressing too hard, even though I used the paints fairly wet. And with the wetter paints also, it helped me to bring in those light colors and then over that those darker colors. And I enjoyed this a lot more than the previous one, where everything turned out thick and dark and was hard to compensate for. And now it was much easier to compensate. Now the biggest challenge in this painting will be painting clear water. And already from the first go, changing the way my strategy in painting, I already could see that I will have a better result in the end than what I had from the previous one. This will be a lot better to get some clear water where it's needed and unclear water, so in the back where it's needed too. The rocks, you can see I'm already approaching them really differently. I learned from the previous one where that went all wrong, where I had all the uniform colors. I decided to add different colors right away so that I don't end up with all the same color everywhere. Although in Andrew's paintings, in this painting and in this lesson, it was all about painting rocks and those small details and doing a lot of them. There are going to be a lot of rocks later on, mainly in the riverbank across the river. Going to be a lot of rocks, and I'm going to add here on the right more rocks later on. But for now, these are the rocks. These were the ones I drew in and where I worked with, and the rest I will add later. So working in layers helped me really to get these tones better and to add a lot more color and keep it a bit more lighter where it needs to be lighter and dark where it needs to be dark. I'm running into a bit of an issue though, and that has nothing to do with the Tisch Academy. I think the Academy is great and all the things I'm picking up from it, learning and discovering are wonderful. And now that Andrew is working on beginner lessons for the landscape section too, the Academy is only going to get better. But filming is becoming a bit of an issue for me. I'm filming this and that means I'm pretty far off. So when I need to do details, normally I would get up close, but with the camera there, I can't do that because then you're going to see my head and you don't want to see my head probably. You want to see what is happening here. So I can't get close enough to my painting to really do the details I want and need to do. And the second thing is, perhaps you've seen it already in this video and in the previous landscape video, which I did in 3 parts. Painting this takes, well, about 20 hours. And the scenes are only going to get more complex, and the more detail you want to put in it and the more realistic I want to make it, because I'm definitely not where I want to be, that's going to take even more time. More time in painting, that means more material to edit, that means longer videos, and I don't want them to make longer. They need to stay around the same time. So that means I have to find ways to make them shorter, cut out certain pieces, show only certain pieces. That means more time editing. And then I haven't even solved the whole issue of me not being able to get close enough. I'll talk about this later on a little bit more, but let's go to these rocks now. I really wasn't looking forward to painting these rocks because I thought that's gonna take a lot of time since there are a lot of rocks on that beach, on the part of that beach. But Andrew showed some great techniques how to paint these rocks, how to make it convincing, yet without spending hours and hours painting each rock and detailing each rock. And the approach really worked and I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot from this whole lesson, all the elements in it. The mountains, the trees, the grasses, the way you do brush strokes, those rocks, the shallow parts of the river, the deeper parts of the river. And when I was done with this, I think I did a lot better than the previous one. And my approach was a lot better, but I'm still not 100% convinced this is the way to paint. Because especially here on the lower right, the whole transparent water part didn't work out as well as it could have. So that's another thing I'll have to take with me in my considerations on how to move forward with becoming a master and how to approach this and what would be the best strategy for me from now on with these landscapes and every painting getting more detailed, more complex, larger, more time, and yet not totally what I want it to be. So that is for me a lot of things to think about and how I'm gonna move forward in this. I really enjoyed painting this painting. And all the elements you bring in and all the highlights and the darker parts which make the painting come alive way more. And I really enjoyed that. So that was a very good learning moment for me, discovering all these new elements and discovering how to bring them in the best way. Better way than before, less illustrative, but still not realistic enough, I think. But although I think I'm on the right track, and I will continue on this track and see what I can improve about this and see where I'm going with this whole adventure in becoming a master. But that will be for the next video. Here's the final painting when I was done, and I really like the way it came out. And it gives me food for thought to see how I'm gonna move forward with this whole adventure.